Good morning. Today is the first day of Hispanic Heritage Month, and it's always an honor to recognize the history, culture, and countless contributions of the Hispanic community of Florida and our nation. It's also Nicaraguan Independence Day, and a time for us to honor the great contributions of Nicaraguans in Florida and all across America. Today, we remember the fight for freedom in countries like Nicaragua, where liberty is under attack. We're here today because Joe Biden has turned a deaf ear and blind eye to the fight for freedom and democracy in Latin America. He has chosen to appease dictators in Cuba and Venezuela. He has taken a weak, soft-handed approach to Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua, and he has allowed dictators to destabilize the region and spread socialism as he let Iran, Russia, and Communist China expand their influence in our hemisphere. We also saw how he lifted restrictions and sanctions on Venezuela and Cuba in May. We've seen his policy of appeasement in action, and has made the United States less safe. But while Joe Biden's shameful appeasement and silence continues, we will not stop fighting. We hear the cries of the freedom movement across Latin America. We believe that Cubans, Venezuelans, Colombians, and Nicaraguans and all people deserve democracy, human rights, and freedom from tyranny. We know that our hemisphere is becoming a more dangerous place because of Joe Biden's weakness, and we know that our adversaries are using Biden's policy of appeasement to undermine America's regional security interests. The President of the United States is the leader of the free world. He needs to start acting like it and stand for freedom and security in Latin America. He needs to stand with the freedom-loving people of Cuba, the people of Venezuela, Nicaragua, and the people of Colombia. Biden can start by doing 5 things today. First, President Biden should reinstate the restrictions he lifted on Cuba and support the passage of the Democracia Act, and a bill I have introduced along with my colleagues here back in October. Our bill will authorize the president to impose sanctions on a foreign national he determines is working with any part of Cuba's government engaged in human rights abuses or supporting terrorist groups. It also authorizes the president to impose sanctions on Cuban officials who engage in human rights abuses and corruption. It prevents the president from easing those sanctions until Cuba has released all political prisoners, established a free press, and instituted free democratic elections. Our bill also addresses the internet concerns Cubans face. It also authorized the president to use every means possible to provide unrestricted, uncensored, reliable internet service to the Cuban people. And our bill requires the president to establish a task force to develop long-term solutions for providing reliable internet service to the Cuban people. Let's pass Democracia Act today. Second, President Biden needs to close the Cuban embassy in Washington, D.C. It was wrong to reopen the embassy in 2015, and given all the communist regime's corruption and abuses, we should not allow it to operate for 1 more minute. Close the Cuban embassy. Third, President Biden should put the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia back on the list of foreign terrorist organizations. FARC is a terrorist organization. The U.S. must not tolerate terrorist groups that support narco states and destabilize the Western Hemisphere. Their terrorist activity has not stopped, and we need the right tools to hold anti-American terrorists in Colombia accountable. Fourth, the President should direct the Department of Treasury to block access to U.S. assets to anyone involved or complicit in organizations, human rights violations, or corruption in Venezuela or Nicaragua. It's important to prevent members of these regimes from entering the U.S. It's equally important to ensure they can't access U.S. funds or U.S. banks. Those responsible for gross abuses and corruption, like the attacks on the Catholic community in Nicaragua, which you can't believe is happening, should not be allowed to enter the United States or access their U.S. bank accounts or U.S. assets. Fifth and finally, the administration should move to revoke licenses to U.S. companies operating in Cuba and Venezuela. Whether you're an airline, hotel, an oil company, cruise line, or agriculture company, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, you should not be working to benefit Maduro, Castro, or Diaz-Canel. And President Biden can help ensure American companies don't send profits to dictators by revoking their visas to operate in these countries. If President Biden did all 5 of these things today, then our hemisphere would be a safer place. The freedom movements in Latin America would be emboldened, and Marxist dictators would be afraid. And these actions would choke the profits these dictators use to finance their terror and tyranny. That should be our goal. If Joe Biden falls short of fulfilling this list, he's aiding and abetting the destabilization of our hemisphere. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. I want to make sure we're a voice for the people that have been impacted by the horrible dictators in Latin America. A Biden no le importa la lucha por la democracia. Biden abandonó por completo a los que luchan por libertad en América Latina. Una y otra vez, cuando Colombia, Venezuela, Cuba y Nicaragua más necesitan el apoyo de los Estados Unidos, Biden elige el apaciguamiento sobre la libertad, seguridad y estabilidad de nuestro hemisferio. Primero, Biden levanta las sanciones al ilegítimo régimen comunista cubano, sin hacer nada por la libertad de los presos políticos, como José Daniel Ferrer. Después, Biden abandonó todavía más la democracia en América Latina al levantar las sanciones contra Maduro y sus matones, sin recibir nada a cambio. En Colombia, en vez de luchar por la paz y la estabilidad en nuestro hemisferio, Biden eliminó a las FARC de la lista de organizaciones terroristas, y especialmente durante la campaña presidencial de Colombia. Y en Nicaragua vemos como Ortega sigue condenando a líderes de la oposición, a la comunidad católica y a todo el mundo de Nicaragua a muchos años más de prisión y opresión, solo por pedir la libertad. Pero Biden no ha hecho nada para apoyar al pueblo de Nicaragua. No podemos regresar a las políticas de Obama, olvidando al pueblo de América Latina. Estoy orgulloso de apoyar a aquellos que luchan por libertad y democracia en América Latina. Next you're hear from, did Marco get here? Next you're hear from Ernesto Ackerman. Thank you for being
here. Good morning. First of all, I want to thank Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart for coming, and especially to Senator Rick Scott for doing and organizing this important press conference at a turbulent time for the United States. For years, our organization, IVAC, has been sounding the alarm that just 1,600 miles from our borders, in a country called Venezuela, a union of countries that detest the United States of America, our values, democracy, and freedom are being united. It is worth highlighting some of those countries: Cuba, China, Russia, Iran with the Hezbollah, Belarus, Nicaragua, Bolivia, etc. It is not secret to anyone that just a few weeks ago, the War Games, sponsored by Russia, where event brings together countries where imperialist aggression against the people is condemned. We know very well that these were not games, but military practices, where Venezuela participated in for the first time. What a coincidence. The narco-dictator Maduro declared a few weeks ago that they will give Iran 2.5 million acres. His predecessor, the other narco-dictator, Hugo Chavez, has set up a bicycle factory in the south of Venezuela as a front, and are in fact extracting minerals for the production of nuclear weapons. Not one bicycle was produced in that supposed factory. The Venezuelan people are not benefiting from another country stripping them of their own natural resources. Another situation that should alarm us Americans is the fact that this erroneous policy of open borders has brought more than 2 million people into this country. Who are these 2 million people? From Venezuela, as an example, the narco-dictator Maduro must be sending secret agents, Bolivarian policemen, to destabilize the United States, which is why it is important that the new Congress put an end to this policy of open borders and have a great control over who is entering in this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning. Senator Rick Scott, thank you for bringing us together here today, and Senator Marco Rubio, who is also here, and all of you. Look, the Biden administration has failed those who are living under repression in this hemisphere. He has consistently given concession after concession to the anti-American dictatorships in this hemisphere, asking nothing in return. Again, the question is, why? Why is it that this administration continuously looks for ways to help, to appease, to help fund these anti-American dictatorships, asking for nothing in return? At the same time, when the people in those countries have hit the streets demanding freedom, where is the solidarity from the President of the United States? There is none. It's just the opposite. It's concessions to those regimes. And if that was not enough, this administration, this president that has been spending money as if there was no limitation, one of the few areas where this president has cut back, and again, where the leadership, Democratic leadership in the House and the Senate are trying to do the same thing, is on the television and radio broadcasts that go into the island of Cuba. Now, they can't say it's because they want to save money, because they have been wasting money on everything. It happens to be one of the few areas where this administration wants to, frankly, eliminate are the broadcasts into the island. We've seen that they're already having to lay people off in OCB, the Office of Cuba Broadcasting. Again, broadcast into the island. This is not a coincidence. And this is not because they don't know what they're doing. Not only, let's be very clear, not only is this hurting those who are struggling to try to recover their freedom in this hemisphere, like in Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and now also we see what's going on in Colombia, but it is also a threat to the national security interests of the United States. These regimes are a cancer. And just listen to what they say. According to those dictators, the enemy is the United States. The enemy is freedom. And yet, this president, this administration, doesn't stop looking for ways to help, to appease, to do everything possible to help these anti-American narco-terrorist dictatorship. So we hope that President Biden will wake up, will realize that what he is doing is not only hurting the cause of freedom in this hemisphere, but it is gravely endangering the national security interests of the United States. Muy brevemente en español, gracias, senador Rick Scott, gracias, senador Marco Rubio, y gracias a todos ustedes por estar aquí. Este es un presidente de una administración que no se equivoca, que siempre está buscando formas de ayudar, de apaciguar a los enemigos de la democracia a través del mundo, pero particularmente en este hemisferio. Busca darle incentivos, eliminar sanciones al régimen en Venezuela, el régimen en Cuba, como dijo el senador Rick Scott, sin pedir nada, nada en cambio. No es por confusión, saben lo que están haciendo. Esta administración está activamente ayudando a estas dictaduras y abandonando a esos que están luchando por su libertad. Pero no solamente esto es destructivo para esos nobles pueblos que están luchando y se han echado a la calle exigiendo libertad. Es un peligro para la seguridad nacional de los Estados Unidos. Pero ahí también este presidente es consistente. Si uno es enemigo de los Estados Unidos, si uno está luchando en contra de los Estados Unidos, en contra de los intereses de los Estados Unidos, pueden contar con el presidente Biden, con su ayuda y con su solidaridad. Pero a esos que luchan por la libertad, este presidente les da la espalda. No, presidente Biden, póngase del lado de la democracia, de la libertad y de la seguridad nacional de los Estados Unidos. Ya es hora que este presidente se dé cuenta que tiene que apoyar a la causa de la libertad, no a los que condenan a esos pueblos a la miseria, a las dictaduras. Así que gracias, senador Rick Scott, por convocar esta importante reunión en esta época. Gracias por tu liderazgo y porque nunca se confunde cuando estamos hablando del tema de tanta importancia para todos nosotros, el tema de la libertad. Muchísimas gracias a todos ustedes y muchísimas gracias al senador Rick Scott. Quiero brevemente presentar a dos personas que están acá. Silvia Iriondo. Silvia Iriondo from Mothers Against Repression, a fighter for freedom and dignity, is here, and you will hear from her, and also Orlando Gutierrez Boronat from El Directorio Democrático, a person who has dedicated his life for the cause of freedom for the Cuban people, but also freedom for those who are languishing under dictatorships everywhere in the world. Silvia.
Marco's going to be next.
Oh, wait.
He has to go back.
That's right. Well,
I'll be very fast. I apologize. We have a hearing. Just briefly, and I thank you, Senator, for doing this. Thank you, Sylvia. I'm going to introduce her in a moment. I prefer you hear from her than from me, from all of them except for me. I just have things that struck me as I walked up here today. You know, a couple of years ago at this time, that house that stands behind us, that White House, was a bastion for freedom and liberty in this hemisphere. Oftentimes, I and Congressman Diaz-Balart and other members of our delegation, Maria Villa Salazar, who's here, Congressman Jimenez, obviously Senator Rick Scott after he was elected in 2018. Oftentimes, we went into that building, we went into that Oval Office, and we talked to the President of the United States, and he made Cuba a priority. He made Venezuela a priority. He made Nicaragua a priority. He made it a priority. There was activism, and there was things going on, and they were looking for ways that they could further the cause of freedom. Today, there's nothing. Nothing comes out of this White House that's proactive on the cause of liberty and freedom in the region. It's interesting that they have a position, and the position is largely to be agnostic and just to stay on the status quo with some of the changes that have made, but they've done nothing active, that's for sure. And the reason is simple. Sadly, in that building that's behind me, there are people working at the National Security Council in this White House who were against all the things that happened just 2 years ago. They were against the additional sanctions on the regime in Cuba. They were against supporting the interim government in Venezuela and against the sanctions against the Venezuelan government. They were against the sanctions that we put in place against Nicaragua. They were against all of these things. And these are the people that are running Western Hemispheric affairs in the building behind us now. And I'm setting a prediction so you understand it now. After these midterms, after November, what you're going to see is a full effort to try to recalibrate policy towards Cuba, to get rid of more and more of those sanctions, and to appease that regime. What you're going to see after November is they're going to say that the new Colombian government is asking us to reopen diplomatic recognition of the Maduro regime, so that's what the U.S. is going to do, and that's what you're going to see. After the election, what you're going to see is some way to try to get back into a working relationship with Murillo, and I say Murillo because Ortega's there, but I'm not sure how much he calls the shots anymore, but his wife is crazy and she's evil, and she calls the shots. And so I think that's what you're going to see after these midterms. Yo me acuerdo hace solamente 2 años que en este edificio, esa Casa Blanca, era un lugar donde había activismo hacia la causa de la libertad en la región. Aquí todos estos miembros de esta delegación y de estos grupos que estaban aquí, muchísimas veces entraron a esa Casa Blanca, se reunían incluso con el presidente. Y él tomó acciones, el presidente Trump tomó acciones concretas contra el régimen en Cuba, contra el régimen en Nicaragua, contra el régimen en Venezuela. Durante los últimos 2 años, esta nueva Casa Blanca no ha hecho absolutamente nada. Para ellos no es prioridad. Lo que sí han hecho es mandar personas a reunirse con el régimen de Maduro en Venezuela. Lo que sí han hecho es reunirse con el régimen cubano para tratar de buscar una manera de reabrir, mandar más personal a la embajada. Han hecho algunas cosas, pero no hablan mucho de Nicaragua. Y la razón es muy simple. Dentro de esa Casa Blanca están trabajando personas en el equipo de trabajo que están encargados de la región, que son simpatizantes de estos regímenes. La persona encargada del tema de Cuba en el Consejo de Seguridad Nacional es una mujer que hace solamente 2 años estaba coordinando viajes a Cuba, mano a mano con el régimen. Son personas que se pronunciaron claramente en contra de las sanciones en contra de Maduro, en contra de las sanciones en contra de Ortega en Nicaragua. Y lo que le digo ahora es que después de estas elecciones en noviembre, lo que van a ver es que esta Casa Blanca va a buscar la manera de reabrir enlaces con el régimen en Cuba, porque eso es lo que está pidiendo la base de izquierda, y vamos a ver que van a decir, bueno, el nuevo gobierno de Colombia está buscando que nosotros nos arreglemos con Maduro. Ellos van a reconocer a Maduro, tenemos que hacerlo también porque los colombianos nos están pidiendo eso. Es lo que van a hacer después de noviembre, acuérdense que se lo dije hoy. Así que para nosotros seguimos siempre junto a todos estos grupos. Me voy temprano porque tenemos una audiencia ahora mismo en el Senado a las 9:30 sobre el tema de Venezuela. Para nosotros siempre esto va a ser una prioridad y seguiremos siempre dándole prioridad a la causa de la libertad en este hemisferio, a la libertad en Cuba, en Venezuela y en Nicaragua. Quiero presentarle a alguien que ha luchado por la libertad en Cuba por años y años, Silvia Iriondo, que va a hablar sobre específicamente el caso de Cuba y el sufrimiento de ese pueblo.
Good morning. There is undoubtedly an extreme socialist tide sweeping across all major countries in the region, possibly including Brazil next month, which poses a serious threat to the national security of the United States and the freedom and democracy in our hemisphere. This cancer originated in Cuba and has continuously spread its malignant influence to the Americas, effectively controlling the Venezuelan dictatorship through thousands and thousands of agents and military personnel on site, as well as joining forces with Nicaragua and other allies. The Castro regime sets the example for the rising leftist governments, rules its people with an iron fist under a brutal repression, and are sworn enemies of the United States, sowing anti-Americanism and undermining this nation's values, such as the participation of Cuban diplomats in the United States in influence operations against the country, gathering intelligence and recruiting sources for purposes of espionage. These operations have allowed the regime to target and kill American citizens, like the Brothers to the Rescue massacre in 1996. I should know, I am a survivor of that massacre. I was on board the third and only plane that returned to base on that fateful day. That day, Fidel and Raúl Castro, the dictators Fidel and Raúl Castro, ordered Cuban planes to the Straits of Florida to hunt and shoot down 2 Brothers of the Rescue planes, murdering American citizens on that fateful day. Carlos Costa, Armando Alejandre Hijo, Mario Manuel de la Peña, and Pablo Morales. They are forever etched in our memory. They were in the Straits of Florida, in international airspace, to save lives of men, women, and Cuban children who desperately, and in any object that floated, would abandon the island in search of freedom. And in trying to do the most noble mission of humanity, which is saving lives, they were murdered by the Castro regime. One of the most horrendous crimes committed by that regime in the long list of crimes against humanity committed by that regime. The use of Cuban territory by superpowers like China and Russia to establish espionage operations and undercover activities directed at the United States. The mysterious Havana syndrome, which has caused serious brain injuries to American diplomats in the island since 2016. And the list goes on and on and on. But what endangers most the security and stability of Latin America and also of the United States is the increasing and unobstructed penetration of Russia, China, Iran, and narco-terrorist organizations in close alliance with Cuba. The commander of the U.S. Southern Command, General Laura Richardson, recently stated before the Senate Committee on Armed Services that, and I quote, "Today, more than ever, America's fate is inextricably linked to events beyond our shores. This region, our shared neighborhood, is under assault from a host of cross-cutting, transboundary challenges that directly threaten our homeland. General Richardson specifically referred to Russia and China, which are, and I quote, aggressively expanding their influence in our neighborhood. While the Russia-China offensive in Latin America is gaining strength, the Biden administration remains aloof, with no comprehensive and proactive strategy and no leadership whatsoever. If we do not want to lose our hemisphere and endanger our national security, the United States must, 1, take a stand, countering the continued inroads in the region of Russia, China, and other hostile powers. 2, support our democratic friends and warn those who are colluding with our adversaries. And 3, back the pro-freedom movements in Cuba and other oppressed countries in this hemisphere, as the United States successfully did with solidarity in Poland. The liberation of the first country that fell under the communist yoke in the Americas, Cuba, would turn the socialist tide and mark the new beginning of a free, secure, and prosperous era for our peoples and for our hemisphere. Thank you, Senator Scott. Thank you, Senator Rubio. Thank you, Congressman Diaz-Balart. Thank you, Maria Elvira Salazar, Congresswoman. Thank you for giving us this opportunity here today. God bless the United States of America. ¡Viva Cuba libre! ¡Viva! ¡Viva! ¡Viva nuestro hemisferio libre! ¡Viva! Y ahora me han pedido, porque no pudieron estar aquí, que lea una carta de la familia de José Daniel Ferrer, líder de la UNPACO y prisionero político cubano. And now they have asked me, and I will read it in Spanish, to read remarks by the family of José Daniel Ferrer, leader of UNPACO and a Cuban political prisoner. The letter is somewhat long, but believe me, not as long as 1 hour, as 1 day, as 1 minute is in Cuban prisons for José Daniel Ferrer and for all the Cuban political prisoners. And it says, reciban todos nuestros más cordiales saludos, nuestro agradecimiento al senador Rick Scott, así como a todo su fabuloso equipo, en nombre de José Daniel Ferrer, los miembros de UNPACO y de los prisioneros políticos injusta, arbitraria y cruelmente encarcelados por el despiadado régimen ilegítimo de Raúl Castro y Díaz-Canel. Lamentamos mucho el no estar presentes y agradecemos la oportunidad de llevar nuestro necesario mensaje a tan importante evento. Desde el día 12 de julio del pasado año, nuestro pueblo determinó reclamar y exigir pacíficamente justicia y libertad, teniendo como única respuesta la represión brutal y desmedida de la inescrupulosa y perversa dictadura en el poder y sus sicarios. Encarcelaron a más de 1000 ciudadanos por el simple hecho de ejercer, promover y defender sus derechos como seres humanos. Otros valerosos cubanos ya cumplían injustas condenas por motivos políticos y posteriormente, el 11 de julio, la dictadura ha continuado deteniendo y encarcelando tanto a ciudadanos determinados como a opositores pacíficos. Al ser trasladados a prisión, unos son confinados en destacamentos en condiciones de hacinamiento junto a delincuentes comunes altamente peligrosos y al servicio de la tiranía. Otros en celdas de aislamiento sin poder ver ni la luz del sol, según el comportamiento en prisión y el de los familiares en las calles. Unos reciben determinados beneficios y otros son aún más castigados, como es el caso de José Daniel, Aymara Nieto, Walnier Aguilar, Ernesto Borges, Noslen Ayala, Maikel Osorbo, Luis Manuel Otero, Félix Navarro y su hija Zaili, Lázaro Yuri Valle, Eider Frometa, Manuel de Jesús Rodríguez, Oscar Peñas, entre otros. todos amenazados y condicionados, además de padecer hambre extrema, falta de atención médica y carencia de medicamentos. Convives con chinches, mosquitos, cucarachas, moscas e inclusive ratas, varios de ellos llevados a prisiones a cientos de kilómetros de su lugar de residencia. José Daniel Ferrer es víctima del desmedido odio, ensañamiento y extrema crueldad de la dictadura Castro-Canel comunista. Desde el día 14 de agosto permanece confinado en preparada celda de aislamiento de la prisión Mar Verde en Santiago de Cuba, sometido a torturas físicas y psicológicas constantes y permanentes, lugar donde ha contraído un gran número de patologías inducidas con el propósito de rendirlo y aniquilarlo. No le permiten tener papel y lápiz ni siquiera para solicitar asistencia religiosa. Durante meses consecutivos le han impedido ver un rayo de sol. Recientemente le negaron sacarlo al sol durante aproximadamente 6 meses. El día 5 del presente mes, luego de 55 días sin verlo ni escucharlo, permitieron que solamente su esposa lo viera durante cerca de 15 minutos en el mismo pasillo donde el día 12 de julio solo le permitieron un total de 2 minutos de visita con su esposa y 2 de sus hijos. Lugar cercano a la celda de castigo donde lo mantienen enterrado en vida y muriendo lentamente, encontrándolo extremadamente delgado, con fuertes dolores en un brazo, aún con sangrado bucal, pérdida de la visión, calambres y parálisis momentáneas en sus manos, erupción en su piel, producto de hongos o bacterias. Desde el día 4 de junio le niegan hablar por teléfono y desde ese mismo día, a raíz de sentirse aún peor, con sensación muy rara y percibir que le estaban suministrando determinada sustancia tóxica en los escasos y mal elaborados alimentos del penal, determinó alimentarse solamente de la java que le preparamos los familiares y le están permitiendo cada 45 días. Voy a dar copia de esto y voy a acabar diciendo este mensaje directo de la familia de José Daniel. Ninguna dictadura cede ante complacencias, solo ceden ante posturas firmes y medidas concretas y eficaces. Los gobiernos democráticos no pueden permitir que otros valerosos y abnegados cubanos sean asesinados. Tampoco deben permitir que la dictadura castrista continúe llevando su criminal sistema a otros países, ni infiltrando agentes como siempre ha hecho y continúa haciendo, inclusive en Estados Unidos. El pueblo continúa sobreviviendo en la miseria extrema, sin tener ni un pedazo de pan para llevar a sus bocas, ni un pedazo de jabón para lavar sus manos, sin una aspirina para aliviar un dolor de muela o de cabeza, sin alimentos, sin medicamentos y sin lo más preciado que Dios nos ha dado, la libertad. ¡Viva José Daniel Ferrer! ¡Viva! ¡Viva los presos políticos cubanos! ¡Viva! ¡Libertad para Cuba! ¡Libertad! Gracias.
Good morning. My name is Orlando Gutierrez Boronat. I'm the coordinator of the Assembly of the Cuban Resistance. My remarks will be brief and they will be in English only. First of all, I want to thank Senator Rick Scott, who's a champion of freedom for Cuba, for honoring us with this invitation to be here today. Thank you, sir. And I want to thank the other Senator Mark Rubio, Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart, Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar, who are champions of the right to freedom of the oppressed peoples of Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Bolivia. As we stand here today, we ask, what is it going to take for the United States of America to stand up to the criminal regime in Cuba and initiate proactive policies to help the Cuban people bring about regime change? Enough is enough. How many more American citizens does the regime need to kill or to attack with directed energy weapons as we saw in Havana recently? How many more Cuban miners need to be beaten and assaulted by repressive forces for demonstrating, as they have consistently since July 11th of 2021? How many more political prisoners need to be condemned simply for wanting freedom? And the horrible conditions of Cuban prisons have just been explained to you by Silviriondo. How many mothers and fathers need to be separated, forcibly separated from their children for their religious or political beliefs? How many more times will we allow this regime to weaponize immigration? How many more countries worldwide and in this hemisphere will fall into the tentacles of this subversive regime? What is it going to take for the United States to urge its allies, countries like Canada and the European Union, and the Club of Paris, to stop funding repression in Cuba? How much longer will the European Union and Canada finance Communist China and the Russian Federation's top surrogate in the Western Hemisphere? Since July 11, 2021 of last year, the Cuban people, based on years of resistance to the regime, began a national civic uprising with thousands protesting across the island. In the past year alone, 25 Cuban generals have had mysterious deaths. What is now needed is a proactive strategy of support for Cuban freedom, one that begins with full implementation of the Cuban Liberty Act and the passing and enablement of the Cuban Democracy Act. One where the United States of America and other democracies, together with a unified democratic Cuban leadership, clearly show the Cuban people that they will have full support for their liberation and national reconstruction. The return of Cuba to the community of democracies will be a blessing for the Cuban people, for the United States, and for the Western Hemisphere. Long live the United States of America. Patria y vida.
Good morning to all of you, and thank you, Senator Rick Scott, for putting together this very important press conference. As a news person, I know that the sound is not good for you, so let's start it all over again. Thank you very much, Senator Rick Scott, for putting together this important news conference, press conference, on a topic that has been completely forgotten by the Biden administration. So the question is, what is the Biden administration doing to stop Daniel Ortega, the new dictator of Nicaragua? As a congresswoman, representative of District Number 27, the city of Miami, where we have hundreds of thousands of Nicaraguans who fled oppression, I fought hard and I was able to pass a law by the name of Renacer, the Renacer Act, and that is a law right now. And what does it do? It puts sanctions on Ortega's henchmen, it cuts off international financing to his regime, and it ends our trade with Nicaragua. Now that President Biden has the tools to break Ortega's economy, he needs to use them because the law is there. It's called the Renacer Act. Every day, Nicaragua sinks further and further into totalitarianism. On the political front, the dictator is jailing his opponents, and now he has dared to attack the most powerful pillar in the battle between good and evil in Nicaragua. It's called the Catholic Church. A month ago, Bishop Rolando Alvarez was placed under house arrest. He kicked out of the country 18 nuns from the legendary mission of Mother Teresa of Calcutta, and I was able to interview those nuns who were doing the best they could do in helping the sick and the poor in a place called El Mercado Oriental. I was able to be there, I saw them, and I know how important they are for the Nicaraguans. And now they have been expelled. Despicable. To cut his power, we, the United States, the free world, we need to hit him where it hurts, the bank. No more sweet deals for Ortega. And I feel so bad for the Nicaraguans because I know them so well. I was Central American Bureau Chief for Univision, stationed in Nicaragua, so the Nicas are my people. I feel for them and I know them. But we're sending, right now, the United States, we're sending $500 million to a man who is violating every law of decency. Ortega doesn't care if the Nicaraguans eat 3 times a day. He is in the business of power. He's not in the business of helping his people. So we, the United States, we're in the business of democracy. That's why we cannot do business with him. So we don't need the beef from Ortega, we can get it from Brazil. We don't need the coffee from Nicaragua, we can get it from Colombia. There's plenty of fish in Panama and Ecuador, we can get all the fish from those two neighbor countries. And the international lending, no more money from the IMF, the World Bank, and the Inter-American Development Bank. No more credits. The American dollars are worth more than what they can buy. The American dollar is the symbol of freedom and democracy. In Nicaragua, unfortunately, truth has become treason. And people right now can choose to suffer the consequences of telling the truth or suffer the results of staying quiet. I and the rest of the people that are behind me were choosing the side of truth. Ortega's political prisoners, we're with them. The brave bishops, we are with them. The expelled Mother Teresa nuns, we are with them. We are with the Nicaraguan people. Today is Nicaragua's Independence Day. May the Lord Almighty be with that very brave people of Nicaragua. So now I'm going to say, voy a decir ahora los mismos comentarios en español. La gran pregunta es, ¿qué es lo que está haciendo la administración del presidente Biden cuando se trata de Nicaragua? Tenemos que hacer todo lo que podamos hacer para combatir a este tirano. Como congresista del distrito número 27 de la ciudad de Miami, que represento a cientos de miles de nicaragüenses en el exilio, logré pasar la ley que se llama Renacer. Y esta ley pone sanciones a los secuaces de Ortega, corta la financiación internacional y pone fin a nuestro comercio con Nicaragua. Ahora el presidente Biden, el que vive aquí en la Casa Blanca, tiene los instrumentos en sus manos, las herramientas para quebrar a Ortega. Tiene que usarlas. Esperemos que lo haga. Cada día Nicaragua se hunde más en el totalitarismo. En el frente político metió preso a sus opositores políticos y ahora se ha atrevido a atacar el pilar más poderoso en la batalla entre el bien y el mal en Nicaragua, que se llama la Iglesia Católica. Hace un mes el obispo Rolando Álvarez fue arrestado y ha expulsado a 18 monjas de la Legión de la Madre Teresa de Calcuta. Y yo en particular conozco muy bien a esas monjas porque en el mercado oriental las entrevisté y vi el servicio que le hacían al pueblo nicaragüense cuando era corresponsal de guerra destacada en Nicaragua. A Ortega hay que darle donde le duele, en el banco. No más tratos ventajosos para él. Anualmente le estamos enviando más de $500 millones a un hombre que está violando todas las leyes de la decencia y la democracia. La carne de Nicaragua se puede comprar en Brasil, el café en Colombia y los pescados en Panamá y Ecuador. ¿Y qué pasa con la financiación internacional? No más dinero del FMI, del Banco Mundial o del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo. Nada. Los dólares americanos valen más de lo que pueden comprar. Los dólares americanos son el símbolo de la libertad. Son el símbolo del avance de la democracia. En Nicaragua, desgraciadamente, la verdad se ha convertido en traición. Entonces ahora uno puede elegir entre sufrir las consecuencias de decir la verdad o sufrir las consecuencias de quedarse callado. Yo estoy con los que eligieron el lado de la verdad, con los presos políticos, con el obispo valeroso, con las monjas de Calcuta, con los nicaragüenses de a pie que quieren democracia para su país. Hoy es el día de la independencia de Nicaragua. Que Dios bendiga a los nicas y un pueblo tan valiente y valeroso. Que Dios los bendiga. Thank you. Thank you.
Now we're going to hear from Mónica Fuentes.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator Scott, for giving us this opportunity to speak about the reality in our countries. As Senator said, I am from Nicaragua, and as he also mentioned, today is the 201st anniversary of independence of Nicaragua. Unfortunately, Nicaragua is going through its darkest and longest night of human rights violations and heinous crimes that started in 1979 with the help of the Jimmy Carter's administration. And until this day, over 80,000 people have been killed or disappeared, and the number continues to grow. In the first year alone, they killed 665 political prisoners without due process. In the first couple of years, they also committed a heinous crime in the Atlantic coast of Nicaragua called Navidad Roja, the Red Christmas. They burned an entire town completely, 4,000 families, 4,000 homes. People were burned alive, women were raped. And you know what? The sad part of it all is that they continue to do the same thing nowadays. In 2018, June 16th, they burned the Velasquez family alive, the grandparents, the parents, and the 2 kids, just for not allowing a Sandinista sniper into their roof to kill the protesters in the streets. Also, in June of 2018, a sniper shot a 15-month-old baby, Taylor Rubio. And you know what the death certificate of these kids said? Cause of death, suicide. Why? Because they have no respect for life, they have no respect for laws. They don't have laws, they are the law. And they continue to do so to this day. If you dare to try to make a difference or make a change, you end up in prison, as we have right now, close to 200 political prisons, including those who wanted to run for president. In Nicaragua, the repression is going worse and worse day by day. Just by walking on the streets with the Nicaraguan flag, you go to prison. There is no freedom in Nicaragua. They are terrorists. They are terrorists, and they are allied with our enemies. They just recently, in June 9th, signed a military treaty with Russia. In July, an economical treaty with China. Nicaragua serves as the open door to Russia, Iran, China, our enemies. We must include the Nicaraguan FSLN, the Sandinistas, into the terrorist list. We have to declare them terrorists because they have acted upon, and if we see September 11th, did you know that 2 of those killers, of American killers, had Nicaraguan passports, courtesy of the Ortega and Murillo's dictatorship? It's a time to put an end to this. So we ask this administration to take action, to put in effect the Renacer Act, to support the Democracia Act of Senator Scott. We have to implement all sanctions possible, not only to the dictators and every member of the regime, but also the military and all of their accomplices, including people from the private sector and the private banking, who right now are helping those already sanctioned to avoid the consequences of the sanctions. We respectfully ask this administration to do something and make a difference, because it is an endangerment to our national security. We have them right in the backyard, and we need to save our countries and America. May God bless America. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to hear from Norma.
Good morning. I hope I'm not going to be too long. It is an honor to be here to speak on behalf of the Venezuelan people and our cause for freedom and democracy. Thank you, Senator Rick Scott, members of Congress, and all the leaders of Latin America who fight for the long-awaited freedom of our lands. Year after year, we have seen Nicolas Maduro and his criminal regime destroying the country, a country as rich as Venezuela, with the largest oil reserves in the world, became a country of starvation with no freedom of any kind, a country of criminals, and what is worse, the center of terrorism and drugs for Latin America. This is the reason why millions of Venezuelans have had to flee the country. Venezuela became the country with the largest mass exodus after Syria. This is the reason why the people in Venezuela need real help and support. But the support we have seen from this administration is empty, with no purpose of helping the Venezuelan people. There is no doubt on why the people of Venezuela felt betrayed. by this administration when we learn about the secret meetings between the United States and Maduro's headlines of thugs, and when they eased the sanction on the regime and started negotiation for oil. You do not negotiate with terrorists. We should not forget it's a price of $15 million on Maduro's head. We should not forget that there is an investigation by the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity and systematic violations of human rights in the country, from the confrontation of Maduro's government and the opposition, where 124 protesters died and over 5,000 were detained. Every action Biden administration has taken has only empowered the dictatorship in Venezuela. Where do you think the oil money is going? Where is the fight for freedom, democracy, and stability in the hemisphere? Every time we have needed President Biden's support, he has failed us. It is time for the United States to take care of the people of Venezuela, to care about freedom and democracy in our hemisphere, to care about security and stability in Latin America, and protect our country, the United States, because at this point in time, we are surrounded by enemies, and they are only few hours away. The time to act is now. My name is Norma Reno, and I'm a fighter for freedom. Thank you. No se olviden que los enemigos están solo a 3 horas desde los Estados Unidos. Estados Unidos siempre ha buscado mirar a los enemigos que están en el Medio Oriente, que están en Asia, que están muy lejos de este país, pero los enemigos los tenemos al lado, en Latinoamérica. Ahora se han reunido todos, lo único que quedaba en el hemisferio era Colombia, y ahora Colombia también ha sido posesionada por el comunismo. Tenemos que luchar contra esos enemigos porque están demasiado cerca. Ahora, now I would like to read a letter from the democracy leader and activist Fabio Andrade. In representation of the people of Colombia, he couldn't be here, but he sent his remarks. Thank you, Senator Rick Scott, for organizing this very important press conference with distinguished members of Congress to make aware the threat we are under with socialism, and not only here, but in our hemisphere, coming to America now. My name is Fabio Andrade. I am American. I was born in Colombia, and I am honored to address these words today to join all of you, senators and congressmen, and our great leaders of Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba, to be a voice of the threat of socialism. Dear Senator, I speak on behalf of over 1 million Colombians in Florida that we are requesting that the Biden administration must redesignate FARC as a terrorist organization. This terrorist organization, FARC, continue with their criminal actions by exporting cocaine to America. Terrorist attacks continue to the population, to the police, and to the military. As Colombian American, we join you all here to support all the initiatives proposed in this event today. Together, we urge this action must be addressed immediately by the Biden administration. As the new administration in Colombia is doing everything possible to destroy the institution, including the police and military, by appointing former terrorists in his administration. If we don't redesignate FARC as a terrorist organization watch list, now Colombia democracy will be lost. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Norma. I do want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank all the individuals from Latin America that care about freedom and liberty, and I hope this will be the start of the Biden administration finally not abandoning freedom and liberty and the fight for freedom and liberty in Latin America. Thanks, everybody.